Welcome, everyone. I'm Two Turtle Tom, and tonight I have Russ Gurley. Russ is the founder of the Turtle and Tortoise Preservation Group. Russ is an artist, he's a publisher, he's a designer, and he keeps lots of interesting, really interesting reptiles and amphibians. Welcome, Russ.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you.
You are welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. We are coming up on the Turtle and Tortoise Preservation Group annual meeting or conference, and that's November in Mesa, Arizona. Um, why Mesa? How did it get started there?
So okay. I'll give you a medium version. So I
Sure.
started TTPG in '96, and that was the same year that Rick Hudson started TSA and David Lee started the Asian Turtle Consortium. We all started. The turtle crisis in Asia was really at its peak, or at least the information coming out about it. So that's why I think all of that happened that same year. Um, and I created a little newsletter and sort of just reached out. This is a long time ago. This is
Yeah,
pre-internet and all of
Y-
that. So
you mailed that newsletter
I
probably,
did. I
like
did.
with
I had it. I
stamps.
printed it down at my local Staples and uh, filled the envelopes just like I do still today.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was not a nonprofit, so I didn't take people's money for memberships. I just sort of tried to kind of build this sort of grassroots group of guys interested in turtles and saving turtles. So flash forward about 10 years, I guess, in about '06. James Badman from Arizona State University and Drew Reinhardt, who are both from the Phoenix area, contacted me and said, "Hey, why don't we reformat TTPG and do full nonprofit and make it something really big?" And I was, of course, grateful for that. And so our first board was, I think, Richard Fife and Jerry Fife. I think Debbie McMorris has been with us since the start. I should know, but I can't remember. But anyway, so most of that original board and the original Drew and James that really inspired us to go big are all in the Phoenix area. And Drew and James, I think they had already put on a reptile show in Mesa at the convention center, so had some connections there. And they said, how about if we attach TTPG to the Phoenix Reptile Expo? And it made sense because we were really, in those early days, the first couple of conferences, the attendance was a very passionate crowd, but not a giant crowd. So we sort of played off of each other and used some of their attendance to boost TTPG and hopefully our TTPG guys. That's why the TTPG conference is Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, because we attach it to the Phoenix Reptile Expo, which is Saturday, Sunday. So that's why a lot of people kind of don't like the idea that we're Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, because it's during the school season and also work days. But
Sure.
that's why TTPG occurs Wednesday, Thursday, Friday,
Okay.
and
And
why
this,
it's in Arizona.
yeah, no, yeah, that's you. You couldn't really ask for a better climate in November, I think,
Oh
than
yeah, November.
Arizona.
November is yeah,
It's
and
spectacular.
we've been approached several times to have the conference in Chicago and East Coast Baltimore, East Coast Florida, and it's just nice for us to sort of combine our interests and we think a lot of the that venue has done a pretty good job as far as hosting us and
I
it's not.
I like that it's just the right size venue that you don't have to worry about parking, but everything that you could want really is right there. So,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and food
quite
and
nice.
nightlife and the whole thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been really good for us.
What were those first meetings like?
Um, so I've been part of IHS for about 25 years or 30 years. And I hosted Turtle Night at Daytona. Actually, the first Turtle Night was at Orlando. And then when Wayne Hill moved the expo over to Daytona Beach, I did another 11 Turtle Nights. So I've been pretty good about finding speakers and finagling ways to get them there, so that part was pretty easy, was finding speakers, and I guess I had a few connections in the reptile world too. So but I remember the first conference on Thursday night. We all went to a local restaurant and we all fit in the restaurant, which was funny. And
Wow.
I don't remember the numbers, but it must have been 40 or 50 people probably. Um, and I laughed because I think even maybe the first 2 or 3 years after the meeting, we all went to the same restaurant and all hung out. And now, of course, it's so big that we spread out all over Mesa and go to restaurants and sports bars and breweries and all sorts of things. So in one sense, it's still very social. We purposefully don't schedule things in the evening so that people can socialize and make connections because they're coming from all over the U.S. and parts of Europe, and we do very long lunches too for that same reason, so people can go and hang out and talk turtles and make connections. And the first, it seems like maybe the first 3 or 4, we scheduled workshops. We had a guy that came from Madagascar and gave us an update on the conservation of spider tortoises and flat-tailed tortoises and radiateds in the evening. And then a couple of times, I think maybe one of the Galapagos tortoise spinoff groups met in the evening. And there was a little bit of blowback that people
Mm,
wanted to just hang out and talk
mm,
turtles. And
yeah.
so we, after about number 4 or 5, we kind of started leaving the evenings open. So,
Did you envision that it would become what it is today, where we fill a whole room like that?
I didn't. And the main reason is again, because TSA and Dave Lee had a really passionate group, a smaller group, but that was just focused on Asian turtles. And we had a couple of meetings in Florida. And of course, TSA, with all the zoo backing, was going to be a pretty big group right out of the gate. So I was kind of nervous, but after about the second or third year, I realized that my goal for TTPG was conservation through captive breeding.
Mhm.
So we have really stuck with that, whereas some of the other groups are, buying up land in South Africa and doing a lot of in situ work, uh, farming and releasing turtles into the rivers and things like that. So where ours is we focus on captive breeding and supporting captive breeders and enclosure design and better incubation. And so once, after about 5 or 6 years, I guess I will say that, yeah, I think our niche was pretty strong and pretty focused, and we really haven't strayed from it. So
Fantastic. Russ, you've probably kept a lot of different reptiles over your lifetime, I'm guessing.
yeah, you can say that again. Yeah, for sure. So I bought my first. I grew up like all of us, catching snakes and turtles in the backyard and down at the local pond. But I bought a couple of snakes from Steve Osborne in about 1985. Yeah, I must have been, I don't know, 5 or 6 years old. No, I kept them in my college dorm room. So I kind of, like a lot of guys, started out with colubrid snakes. And after college, I went to San Diego and met up with Philippe de Vaugelet, who's obviously very well known, and he's a lizard guy. So he sort
Yes.
of pushed me in that direction, lizards and frogs. And so I did lizards for about 6 or 8 years. And then I guess when I moved back from California, I was really intrigued by of uh, the number of species of turtles that weren't being produced, that were being kept. I've always been sort of into trying to fix problems. And so in those early days, I was really into trying to figure out why these eggs weren't fertilized, or these fertilized eggs wouldn't hatch. And so did a lot of, and of course, turtles is probably number one in that problem category. At least it was in the late 80s, early 90s. So I kept a lot of Acanthocheles, never figured them out, and a lot of Phrynops and Batrachemes and Pelusios and those things that are still giving turtle breeders a lot of problems. So, but that was always my kick, was trying to figure out problem and
Yeah.
problem solve, basically. And I do that even today with lizard projects and snake projects too. I have a lot of weird lizard and snake projects that are kind of notoriously hard to get to breed in captivity
Sure.
or to hatch.
Wow.
So anyway, that's how I
Yeah.
yeah, that was my first jump into turtles, I
Yeah.
guess. And also there was a big male caliger that was at the Fort Worth Zoo, and I would go down there once a month, and they had this big, beautiful male caliger, and so he really inspired me to. He's featured in my book, and yeah, he really did a lot to bring me, made me look at turtles a couple of times too. So
Well, let's talk about your work publishing and TTBG. We talk about the conference a lot, but let's talk about the Batager. Tell us about the Batager.
so we so yeah, those early days, I did a little. I wrote little articles about keeping and breeding turtles, and I would type them out and make copies at the local Staples and send them out to 10 or 15 people that were interested. And so when we reformed TTPG, it just made sense to sort of produce a magazine. You know, a lot of academic journals at the time, Reptiles magazine would publish. This was after the Vivarium, which I was the art director for the first couple of volumes of the Vivarium. So I knew the importance of those articles to teach people how to keep and breed reptiles. But so we knew we wanted to do a Batager. We weren't really sure, but it sort of quickly turned into a magazine or a journal format, full color. We knew we wanted to do full color and something really nice. And in those days, there was some competition. There was, several magazines and several journals from Europe that were being published in English. And unfortunately, now I think we're maybe can't remember who is. I guess Radiata and Cicalia and us. That's kind of it as far
Yeah.
as turtle centric magazines, anyway. So
And if you go to the conference, usually the Batager is ready at that time to pick
yeah,
up.
and guess what?
Yeah.
So the printing game. So I've been publishing, I guess, for about 20 years now, 22 years, and things are really crazy in the printing world. These it's really almost, it's cost prohibitive to do anything in the U.S. anymore, and so we work with a U.S. company that prints overseas, but they have lots of problems with paper and ink, and especially during COVID, I think. So the last couple of years, it's been very, very tight as far as getting that back. We like to save on postage has gone up so expensive that so what we do, we give out the new Batager to all the members who come to the conference. We hand them their Batager, and that saves us $1 on the envelope and $3 or $4 in shipping. So and then when I get back home from the conference, Michael, our membership coordinator, has printed out all of the labels for me. So I spend a week or two sitting on my sofa and stuffing envelopes with Batagers. And and our membership has grown so much that
Yeah.
it's a big task now. It used to be just me kind of hanging out a few nights and plugging those envelopes and a little letter saying thank you. But now it's a little bit bigger task, so which is great. It's a great problem to have. So, but anyway, I finished up the Batager a little earlier this year and got it off to the printer, so we have it. In fact, that's the first time anybody's ever seen it. They just showed up
Wow.
here on Monday afternoon, I guess. So that's this year's Batager that everybody will receive at the conference, and then if you're a member and you can't make it to the conference, I'll mail it out to you the week after. So.
Fantastic. And Anthony, who's in the chat as the Turtle Room, he talks about um, your book Turtles in Captivity from the Professional Breeders series. I've heard many things about this book. Looks like it was published in the mid 2000s.
Actually, I think what Anthony's talking
Early.
about, I did a big book. Here, I'll show you.
Oh,
I brought all kinds of show and
yes.
tell in case I got really,
That
really,
one.
yeah, in case I got really,
Yes.
really
Wow.
boring. Then I've got lots of show and tell here that I'm tearing up.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wrote that. I started that book in about 98 and finished it in 99. But I hadn't really, I sort of, a lot of the species were I hadn't kept or were being kept in Florida or Southern California. And of course, in New York at Bill McCord's place. And so rather than publishing, I decided to travel another year.
Hmm.
So because I wanted it to be, it was not as complete as I wanted. So I traveled basically another year, photographing enclosures and animals and talking to guys who were breeding them. And so I expanded it and then published it in 2000.
Yeah. Anthony
And
Anthony's saying I'm sure
yeah,
there's
and
different printings that came out over the years.
no, that one was only one because
Okay.
I was a teacher and did not
Oh,
have
wow.
any money at all. So I did what I could, and I think I published about 1,000 of those.
Wow.
And then what I did was Bob Ashley from Eco contacted me, and so I did a little spinoff. I'd already written a sulcata book for him
Yeah.
about probably 2 or 3 years before, and so he commissioned me to write, kind of pull some of the pet pieces out of that bigger book. As far as enclosures for baby turtles, we did one called Baby Turtles, and then it went out of print, and we did one called Keeping Aquatic Turtles in Captivity, I think. But they were all, again, kind of pet store and reptile show spinoffs from this bigger book. This big
Mm,
book was too much for most beginning pet owners, and so we were trying to bring people in and not burden them with really unique and unusual situations, and so it's mostly just those smaller professional breeder series books are really for somebody buying a turtle for the first time or
mhm.
sort of kind of beginner to intermediate keepers.
Yeah.
So
Which is so many of us kind of like in our middle ages, there weren't that many good books available really.
yeah, and I think that's probably because the pet trade, since the under 4 inch turtle regulation since 73. I think if pet stores were allowed to sell turtles, then I think we'd have seen a lot more turtle books. Obviously, luckily we had Pritchard and some of those dudes, that we're going to put out turtle books no matter what the pet trade is doing. So, but I think that's why there are so many snake books and so many lizard books, is because that pet trade is kind of fueled that.
So
But
yeah,
oh
go
yeah,
ahead.
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna. You now publish other authors' books now. I just read about Zach Loafman's book. Did you work on that one?
I did. Yeah, it became a thing for me, I guess, in about '05 or '06, that it's like I should probably not publish my own books. It's a little tacky. So I do everything. I have everything kind of peer reviewed by Anthony and Michael T and all these people, and then usually Eco publishes my books, and so I have focused on other people's books. I did a book during COVID on Burt Langerwerf, and I did publish that myself. And I basically I wrote that book for him right before he died in '08 and '09, and I wanted to update it with color images and all of that. So that turned into a beast of a project that ended up being 2 volumes about his life, and then volume 2 is about all the articles that he wrote and published in newsletters and magazines all over. So, but yeah, I did. In fact, let's see, going with my show and tell. So yeah, I got approached by Zach Loafman on this with this really weird manuscript about false water cobras and Barron's racers and all of these little weird rear fang snakes from South America. And I said, yeah, I'll do it. So I published this book, and it just came out. I guess we've had it about 3 or 4 weeks, I guess, and it's doing really, really well. And anyway, I've always got a few projects going, either from other authors or for myself. And this one was a real fun one, and he's just a great dude. So
Yeah, he's
that
awesome.
was an easy choice.
I'm in Akron, Ohio, and Wheeling is not that far from where I am. I really need to make it down and see his new turtle facility that he's
Yeah, I
building.
mean, he's
Sounds really cool.
training. He's got college students that he's training to be zookeepers, which is a zoo biology course. Which is, I don't know. I assume there's another one or two in the country, but it's he's like the Pied Piper with those guys,
Yeah,
and yeah.
he's awesome. Well, Russ, you are also an artist. You have some amazing work that you do. Could you tell us a little bit about your art?
Uh, yeah, it's weird, but so
it's it's fascinating.
yeah, so my mom is a painter, and so I grew up doing art since I could walk, and so in college I was pre-vet with an art minor, and I worked for a summer at a veterinarian, and really did not like it. I'm in a small town, and it was just spaying and neutering dogs and cats all day. So I flip flopped and got a degree in graphic design and painting. And our economy was really bad in Oklahoma in those days. So I went to California, met Philippe and a bunch of those dudes. And so that's how I got involved in the vivarium. So I was the
Yeah.
art director. And I designed a lot of t-shirts and knickknacks and things like that, and people's stationery. And it's hard, it was hard then, and it's hard today to make it as an artist, especially if you specialize in tarantulas and snakes and vampire bats and stuff like that. So anyway, designing books. I mean, that's an art, that I've been
Sure.
doing, I guess, since about the late '90s. A lot of freelance. I just did a coloring book for US Arc. I've done cookbooks,
Oh, cool.
children's books, of course. But in 2015, I got approached. Ari Flegel is a friend and was a fellow artist, and he had spent a lot of time in New Guinea studying Boland's python. So he would show me pictures of the skulls from some of the tribes and all that stuff. And somehow, I can't remember exactly, we got hooked. I remember how. Anyway, we got asked to create a skull for a museum. There was a museum that had a real Osmont skull from Papua New Guinea, and they were going to take it out on the road in a traveling exhibit. And those are put together with mud and tree sap and bones and shells and all that stuff. So they're pretty fragile. So they hired us to create a replica. And we did, and it was very successful. So he and I just started making these skulls. And he was in Fort Worth. He's about 2.5 hours south of me. And he would come up for the weekend, and we would make these weird tribal skulls, kind of based on his photos that he had taken. And we had some shells and beads and headdresses and all of that stuff. So we took it out on the road, and we went to Tinley. We did NERBC Tinley and sold a few. And we did a tattoo convention in Fort Worth and sold a few. I found a crowd that actually has less money than the reptile crowd, is the tattoo crowd. But I could have gotten a full bodysuit because they barter for everything. So anyway,
Oh my gosh.
that was a really interesting convention with people hanging from hooks on their backs and all sorts of things. We learned a lot there. So anyway, I discovered a show in LA that's for artists who are in the movie business, who do special effects and horror and sci-fi. And this guy created a show that's just for those people. So it's been really great. I've been going since 2016. But yeah, I do these weird tribal skulls with headdresses and bones and
you specialize in different cultures that.
Yeah. So this show that I do is pretty sophisticated. So they they have really enjoyed the fact that the stuff that I do is really based on real tribes. So
Yeah,
I do the Dayak from Borneo and the Osmont from New Guinea, and I do some African stuff. And I think if I was just doing weird, creepy stuff, Halloween type stuff, I don't think it would have been as successful. But anyway, it's going really well, and I'm going to ride it until the wheels come off. So,
it's really cool.
uh,
I in college I got to go to Borneo, and I went to a longhouse in Sarawak and saw the skulls hanging
yeah, it's
from
interesting that that whole part of Southeast Asia is just they just have a real different. The Osmod especially, those skulls are their grandparents and aunts and uncles, and they clean them off in the fire and paint them and put beads in them and headdresses on them, and they hang them in their homes. I mean, it's like family photos, which is really
exactly.
interesting.
Yeah.
And then, of course, some of the tribes, they were headhunters, and these are trophies, and
Yes. Yes.
they really scary them up and hang them all around the outskirts of their village to warn other tribes don't go beyond this point. So it's been fun. It's been really interesting learning about the cultures, and also doing some of these pieces. So
Well, it's really interesting, and I took some time to learn about it, and I've always been intrigued with what you're doing, but I'm more intrigued than ever. And partly because I have been and seen these real skulls hanging
well,
in
what's nice is, this week I go to
Borneo.
Tinley this next weekend, and I got 4 or 5 Facebook messages and in text saying, "Hey, are you bringing skulls? And I'd like to add one to my collection," and things like that. So that's been really exciting too. It's not just this completely diverse other part of my life. It's sort of crossing over here and there. So.
So let's talk a little bit about your reptile collection that you have today. What species are you working with?
So I have a lot. But I've really cut back. What I'm trying to do is what I've been sort of advocating for years, and I finally taking my own advice. I'm trying to build big groups of fewer things.
Yeah.
And I think across the reptile world, we've all been sort of guilty. Shouldn't say all, but many of us have been guilty of having 2 of these and 2 of these and 2 of these, and being able to say, "Oh, I've got 37 species, or I've got 65 species." And if it's a pair of this and a pair of that, which, as we know, can lead to you feeding turtles for a long time without any babies back. So my collection is mostly Africa and Madagascar. That's lizard, snakes, and turtles. But I did recently send off. I had probably 8 species of Pelusios
Mm,
that I really love, and it took me a long, long time to build a big collection. And after about 7 years, I realized that these are imported turtles as adults in a different hemisphere and indoors in a facility in Oklahoma. And so, yeah, I guess after about 7 or 8 years, I decided to send them off. I was getting a few eggs and mostly infertile. And so I decided to send them to, most of them went to Florida. Some of them went to Southern California. Some of them went to South Texas. So I've downsized dramatically. My building has 22 ponds, and I probably have turtles in about 11 ponds now, which is really, really weird. Um, but I do a lot of oddballs. I really like muds and musks, so I have Claudius and Acutum and some of those things. I've got 4 or 5 ponds that are just grow out ponds now. I make quite a few Cybin rockiella, crassicolus.
mm,
I like the turtles that were brought in during the 80s and 90s as sort of, I hate to say it, but sort of disposable turtles. There were lots of species that the importers were forced to take.
mm,
I'll give you an example. If you wanted Cora trifasciata, they made you buy 50 cyclimes, leaf turtles.
mm.
And if you wanted Cicalia, they made you buy 50 Cybin rockiella or something like that. So those were sort of those turtles, hit the markets at $8 a piece or $10 a piece, and they've always sort of been overlooked. But now there's dudes, that are setting up ponds with lots of cyclames and separating. Of course, there's, I don't know, 8 or 9 species, and they're separating them out and making sure they're kept as pure as possible. So anyway, that's sort of where my
Yeah.
collection is now. I have
Oh,
a lot of weird things that are sort of experimental or that have not traditionally done well or produced well. So Cybin Rockiella and some of the muds and musks. And I do have a few Pelusios, some Gabonensis left. I have Cupulata left. Some Greeks, tortoises,
cool.
pancakes, just things that I really enjoy rather than uh, a big sort of mass production facility.
Sure.
In the early days, I had, dozens and dozens of map turtles and dozens of, I just, I'm trying to limit, because I have a lot of lizards too. I have probably 100
Yeah.
lizards and maybe 150 snakes too. So yeah, it
Cool.
keeps me busy. Some mammals. I do some weird mammal stuff too. So
And thinking about the evolution of TTPG, thinking about um, focusing and getting the right animals at the right places, we come to a relatively new program, and that is the captive propagation program, the CPP. Is that, did I
Colonian
get that?
propagation program. So
Colonian
let me tell you.
propagation program.
So I'll tell you this. I'll give you a little preview of me probably crying at TTPG.
Oh,
So when I started TTPG in '96, the reason I started it is because there was a male Badiger Basca in a pond in Florida. There was a female Badiger Basca in a pond in Southern California. There was a juvenile female, I think, on the surplus list of the Bronx Zoo, and they were all just growing old in these situations. Year after year, I would check and say, "Hey, is that animal still there?" Yeah, it's still there. And the owner of the female, he actually had a pair, and the male climbed out of his pond and froze one winter, died. But nobody wanted to do anything. These were sort of the gems of their collection. Of course, it was an endangered species, so you couldn't sell it or buy it or trade it. You had to just give it away. And I kept telling them, "Why don't you give them away?" And I said, "They need to be together, and I don't want them." I think, a lot of times there's this sort of
sure.
uh, feeling that maybe this dude's trying to get in on my cool thing. But I said, it makes most sense probably for them to be either in Florida or Southern California, but they had to be together. So
Yeah.
that was literally why I started TTPG. Was like there were so many turtles living as single animals all over the country that should be together. I mean, everybody, you put those baskets together and they lay 40 eggs a year, everybody wins.
Yeah.
There'd be basket everywhere. And of course, flash forward about 40 years, and I think now there are maybe enough basket in Florida. But so anyway, so this CPP that has developed with Cameron Lamb and James Badman and Matthew and some of these Kyle and all these guys, they're giving turtles away. And I tell you, this started with Wayne Hill in Florida, and everybody knows Wayne's been breeding Hamilton's pond turtle, which is one of the most beautiful turtles in the world, and it's an endangered species, or it's labeled as an endangered species. It, of course, is not. But he and Joel are producing hundreds and hundreds of babies. And Wayne called us this year and said, "Hey, I want to give away 50 Hamiltoni and 50 Uniphilus. They're endangered species. I can't sell them out of the state of Florida. I want to give them away to TTPG members." And we did. We had a questionnaire that was sort of had been filled out, and people had shown an interest in certain species. So we just looked and who had an interest beforehand, not just, "Hey, good, I get a free turtle." Making sure that they knew what they were doing and had a nice enclosure or a nice pond set up. And then all of a sudden, over the last probably 2 months, these guys, and I always call them the young guys because it's these new, really excited, passionate guys, are giving turtles away. And it's like, if you need a male spotted turtle, let me know and give me your address. Or if you want you need a radiated tortoise female, give me your address. And I tell you, it's been, I mean, it's more than I could dream for, hope for with starting this so many years ago, that people are starting to take that financial element out. Now, I sell reptiles and I sell reptile books, and I go to reptile expos all over. I was at one last weekend. I'm at one next weekend. So I get selling reptiles. I mean, we have to pay our food bills and buy these very expensive waterland tubs. And so, but I tell you, having a few projects or a few animals where it's like that is not part of the equation is really pretty incredible to me. And what it's doing, it's sort of teaching us, that we don't have to, that sometimes it's about the turtles and building these groups. We've got groups of Hamiltoni and Uniphilus, I think in 12 states. And again, we've got guys that are giving away animals that they could profit from. An adult male or female spotted turtle, you could take it to some show and get a couple of $100 or $300 or $400, but this guy needs it. And so I'm going to get it to him. And it's really, humbling and pretty great. I can't wait to see. And so that's the CPP. The CPP is, it's both. Now people are putting their surplus lists out there and giving TTPG members heavy discounts. Some are still selling them. Some are just, I need this and I have this. So it's a whole broad, but it's getting turtles where they need to go, where people are passionate, and it's not somebody that's getting something rare and then keeping it for a couple of months and then selling it locally or whatever. So anyway, I'm very excited about the CPP and where it's going to go. And like I said, these people that are really taking it to heart are heroes.
It's contagious. The giving is contagious, it seems.
It is. And I know some of those guys that get a bad rap. Tom Crutchfield's been giving away endangered boas. I can't remember which one, Puerto Rican or Jamaican, one of those two. He produces a ton of them, and he gives away every single baby. And he has for a decade. And yeah, it's just pretty cool. I mean, and it doesn't have to be the endangered species. That's the only way you can do it legally.
Yeah.
You can sell them in your state, but you can't do anything across state lines, which is ludicrous, that you couldn't take a Hamilton's pond turtle from Florida to Georgia or Oklahoma to Texas or whatever. But anyway, that's the law, and we have to abide by it until it gets changed. So, but yeah, it's pretty great because now it's, like I said, it's bleeding over into turtles and tortoises and other things that are not necessarily endangered, but that are important species.
Steven says that he can't wait to do his part with his Forstons when he's producing. That's cool.
That's another thing, Steve. I'll embarrass him a little bit too. These guys that, like I talked about, and again, I'm guilty too. I had a ton of turtles, and I had a lot of pairs and a lot of singles, and a lot of, my big groups were sometimes 2 pairs. And these guys like Steven that are focused, they pick a species that they really love. And with Steven, it's those Forstons tortoises. And he's got these big groups. But then guys like Jeremy Thompson and the Conixis guys, I saw 2 Forstons. I'll go back to myself. I saw 2 Forstons. Oh, no, I didn't. I saw 2 elongateds at a show in Texas. And I took a picture and I immediately Facebooked it to Steven. He goes, dude, Forstons, not elongateds. So these guys that are building these big groups, I really think it's the future. I suggested, there was a guy, one of my board members that really loves spotted turtles. And I told him really early on, to become that guy, produce 100 baby spotted turtles a year, be known for that. Or like Wayne with Hamiltoni and a dozen other species now. But these guys that are so focused on these animals, and especially ones that have been imported and traditionally don't do well, like Forstons and elongateds and some of those guys that are putting their focus into these groups and just making more and more and more, the Conixis guys, the hingeback guys. I think those days of trying to have 2 of these and 2 of these and are over. I hope I hope. And it's hard because we're all hoarders, aren't we? Really, we love. I mean, if you have one snake neck species, you really kind of want them all, you know. And there's a few guys in the snake world that do it, you know, have focused on garter snakes or other things for decades, and it really is impressive. But you kind of become the world's leading expert on that species. You know all the little ins and outs of the behaviors and the triggers and how to incubate them and how to raise the babies well without the shells curling and all of these things.
Yeah,
So anyway,
for sure. Absolutely.
rambly. But anyway,
No,
that's where the CPP and what I hope the future. I hope TTPG can be a big part of that
it,
moving
I,
forward.
I think, I mean, I've just watched people receive the animals, they let other people know, they thank the community, and then it just spreads. More and more people are doing things like that. So I think it's incredible, and it's truly the culmination of that TTPG vision, really collaborating, and that's what I think sets turtles and turtle keepers maybe apart. Why do you think this is happening and successful with turtles, but we really haven't seen it maybe with other taxa?
Here's what I think. I should say this too. Now, all through the 80s and 90s, I kept hundreds and hundreds of animals, dozens of species of lizards and turtles. I've kept frogs. At one time I had 3,000 tarantulas. So I'm not telling these guys to focus immediately. You know what I mean? You got to kind of get your feet wet.
Explore.
And I get it. I get you get so excited if you're new in this hobby and you want to try other things. And it's probably makes sense to try other things. Now, when I was coming up, there was the animals were being imported. You know, I would go to LA Reptile every Wednesday and they'd be unpacking Madagascar and Tanzania. And the next day was Guatemala and Honduras. And so we did have opportunities then that are not available now. So I shouldn't be too like focus and don't do anything else. But so anyway, sorry, what was your question?
What is it about turtles
So
that have, the TTPG has formed around turtles? There's no snake TTPG or lizard
right. Well,
T.
they have Chondrofest and they have Crocfest
Okay.
and Iguana Fest. But I will say this: I think it's because you can't get into turtles to make a quick buck. And I'm not crapping on the
Well,
snake and
you
lizard
certainly
crowd.
can get into snakes to make a quick buck. Not everybody's doing that, but it's
Well,
possible with the short generations.
right. So you can buy a rare morph of a corn snake and breed it in a couple of years. The male maybe even a year, and the female maybe 3 years for sure. And you just can't do that with turtles. And I think we saw that a little bit when with COVID money. I think a lot of the snake guys, when the ball python market started to decline, I think a lot of the money guys started looking at turtles
Hmm.
because they saw that we buy and it's a passionate crowd that really will spend money to get turtles. But I think what they've overlooked is that, I've got a friend that got baby radiated tortoises, and the year that the female turned 17 is when she started laying fertile
Yeah.
eggs.
Yeah.
She laid eggs at 15 and 16, but he got fertile eggs when she was 17 years old. So
Wow.
I think if you like turtles and tortoises, you have to really like turtles and tortoises. It's not, you can make um, a good side living and maybe a good living if you're doing Egyptian tortoises and or galops and radiateds and those sorts of things. But you really have to love turtles to keep turtles. They're high maintenance. They eat a lot. There's a lot of food prep. Um, I think I make a bucket of salad. I thaw out mice. I thaw out chicks. I buy tilapia. I buy earthworms. I buy reptilinks. I just think what I do during the day. Now I've got a very diverse collection, too diverse. Um, I've got crickets. I've got a rack of mice, but it's a lot of work to keep a big group of aquatic turtles. And when you mix in tortoises too, which a lot of us do, it's It's
Yeah.
a
Yeah, it's a labor of love for sure.
and of course with aquatics, you've got all the filtrations and the pumps and the water. You've
Yeah.
got to be an aquarist and a water technician and a chemist and all those other things too. So anyway, so I think that's probably
Yeah.
maybe some other people may have other ideas, but I think it's just simply that it's you just can't get in and uh, in and out or quickly of turtles. You have to really enjoy the work.
Absolutely.
You never make your money back.
Well, Russ, this year's TTPG meeting is coming up. It starts November 15th. Are there still spaces for people to
Absolutely.
register?
All you can register online up until probably about a week before we probably take it down because there's that crossover, with all conferences. But yeah, we take walk-ups. We
Great.
have we have probably 20 people, 15 or 20 every year that just walk in and say, "Hey, I'm here. Here's my money." So yeah, we welcome anybody um, at any time. You can come in. So for people that don't know, Wednesday is always our field trip. We do a field trip on Wednesday. We rent buses, and sometimes we go to a zoo, and sometimes we go to a private breeder's facility. We've gotten very large, so we um, has to be a very large place like Arizona Tortoise Compound. We went there last year, or the year before, to Andrew Hermes and Julien's place, which was incredible. And we go to the zoo a lot. So this year we had a request for a repeat of a trip we took about 5 or 6 years ago. We're going to Tucson, to arid lands and to Plants for the Southwest, which are two of the largest cactus and succulent nurseries in the world, because we have a lot of dudes that love weird plants.
Yeah.
And really, it's about the bus trip. It's really about hanging out. We have room for about 50 or 55, I think. And so we all ride down on the bus for an hour and a half and chit chat and talk turtles and buy a few plants and then bus ride back. And then that night we have an icebreaker, which is usually a barbecue dinner. Um, and then the conference is basically all day Thursday and then half a day Friday until about noon. And then we have the lunch banquet. And then this year the lunch banquet is Matt Patterson too, which is he's the
Great.
the, the top turtle painter in the world, I think. Just incredible. Two new books out that he's illustrated. And then so Friday after the banquet, for the first time, the Galapagos Tortoise Alliance and the Connexus Working Group are going to have their annual meetings now at TTPG. We hope every year. We'd love to have them there. So there's going to be two split off groups on Friday after the banquet. Again, the Galop crowd and the Hingeback Tortoise crowd. So everybody is welcome to attend all of it. So, and it's still,
Fantastic.
yeah, I mean, again, I've been doing IHS for about 25 years and other conferences. My friend and I are putting on a gecko conference this coming week at Tinley at NARBC, and they're really expensive. I know that
Mm.
getting people to travel across the country and to register and it's tough. We really appreciate everybody making that sacrifice, and especially the speakers, because a lot of them are spending their own money to travel across the country to give a 45-minute talk to other
Yeah.
turtle nerds. So we're just thankful. It's a weird format. It's an old school format to sit in a room and listen to people talk about turtles and incubation and veterinary care and all of that stuff. But we're we're happy with it. We still have a big crowd every year. So
Absolutely. Well, Russ, I want to thank you very much. Is there any other thing that you'd like to talk about that we
that's it.
didn't
It's
get
over.
to?
I think that's it. I actually brought some a turtle show and tell too, and
Yeah.
but anyway, thanks for this. I'm really I turned
You're
down a
welcome.
lot of these. I
Welcome.
got asked 4 times at the last show I was at, and I'm just not I'm not that guy. But anyway, I know you guys and Matthew are so passionate and have been so supportive of TTPG. So I was very happy to be here. So
Well, thank you, Russ.
yeah,
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. This was an awesome conversation, and Russ, thank you for what you've done to build this turtle community that we have today.
thank
I mean,
you.
without
Thanks.
your vision, we wouldn't be here tonight, and we wouldn't know all of these people across the country. So,
No, somebody may have done it, but yeah,
yeah,
it's great to have so many friends and supporters. Thank you.
it's a lot of work. Well, everyone, have a wonderful night. Hopefully, Matthew feels much better by this time, and hopefully, he can join us next week. Russ, thank you again so much. Everyone, have a wonderful evening. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, everyone.